Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter. A fan novelization by Landon Turner. Chapter 7. "Watch it!" Tommy cried out as the sedan hit a pothole, splattering the side of the car with mud. "Sorry, Tommy, I can barely see in this rain," Trish said, squinting through the storm coming down. "Just slow down, the party's going to go on all night," Tommy said, sucking on his lollipop the hairdresser had given him. "You almost made me lose my lollipop." Trish flashed him a look, but he was right. She had thought about sneaking out after her mother had gone to bed and possibly going over to visit those kids and maybe have a drink. And the short, revealing blue dress that was belted at the waist, high-heeled boots, and subtle but effective makeup she was wearing didn't hide her intentions. She had had to wait for Mrs. Jarvis to go jogging so that she could put on the dress. Otherwise, she wouldn't hear the end of it. She could hear her voice. "You shouldn't go over there in that dress. It's way too short. That's too much makeup." Couldn't she have some fun for once? She hated living out here in the middle of nowhere. She didn't have anyone to talk to, and it was driving her nuts. How did her mother stand it? How was she not losing her mind? She knew what else she would have said if she had asked her about going over to hang out at the rental house. Something about how staying out late with a bunch of hooligans, participating in drugs and other illicit activities, just wasn't healthy for a girl like Trish. But Trish would rather have something bad happen than just nothing at all. Like usual. Isn't that how you grow as a person? How you become stronger? You have to experience tough times so you can learn and grow. So what if she went over there and got into some trouble? Did her mother not trust her to be able to get herself out of a tough situation? But then she thought about what her mother had told her about the murders, about that psycho that killed those people up at the old campgrounds. She would lose her mind if she woke up in the middle of the night and discovered Trish was missing. So maybe sneaking out wasn't the best idea. Going next door just to socialize wasn't some huge deal, though. Why did her mother have to worry so much about every little thing? Did her mother not want her to form relationships and be a teenager for once? Wasn't she a teenager herself once? Didn't she ever do anything bad or dangerous? Trish highly doubted it. Trish never even heard her mother swear except on rare occasions, and she definitely didn't drink or smoke. Trish's friends back in the city wrote to her all the time about all the parties they had gone to and the drinking and smoking and late-night games of spin the bottle, and it just killed her inside. Why couldn't she experience that stuff for once? Trish just had to break out somehow. Maybe tonight was the night. Maybe tonight she would go to that party. Maybe tonight she would get wasted or shack up with someone. Just maybe. Maybe she was just being dramatic again. Lots of people don't even get to go to parties or do drugs, but then again, if you have the chance, why not take it? Life was too short. She had to go to that party. She didn't want to end up a widow in a cabin in the middle of nowhere like Mom because she was scared of the world. Then she thought of Rob and how mysterious but somehow still attractive to her. She couldn't pinpoint it, but something about him drove her wild. Maybe it was his muscles or the curly black hair or his eyes, the ruggedness. She couldn't stop thinking about him. She also couldn't stop thinking about how he had lied when he had said he was hunting bear. There's no bear out here. So what in the world was he doing out here? She got another chill. What if... No, Trish, don't be stupid, she thought. But what if he was the guy who killed those kids? Didn't her mother say he was dead, though? Trish chuckled sheepishly to herself. Come on, Trish, Rob, a psychopath? A bloodthirsty lunatic? Get real. This isn't some cheesy horror flick that you paid $25 to go see at the drive-in. Rob was a little mysterious, but he couldn't hurt anyone, could he? He did lie, however. What was he doing here in the woods? She didn't know, but hopefully she'd seen the last of him. Even though a tiny part of her that she wished would shut up wanted to see him again. Trish pulled into the driveway and drove down the winding path, stopping in front of the house. She glanced over and saw that the rental house lights were on. She sighed a breath of relief. Hopefully they'd stay up long enough for her to sneak past her mother. Tommy and Trish huddled close and ran through the rain and the puddles that were scattered around the front yard, scrambled up the porch steps and went into the house, letting the front door close behind them. "Mom, we're home!" Trish called. The house was pitch black and silent. The only sounds were the thunder and the rain falling on the roof. The living room and kitchen were empty. "Where is she?" Trish turned back to Tommy. Tommy shrugged cluelessly. "I don't know," he said. Trish walked further into the house with Tommy behind her, looking for her mother. but she was nowhere to be seen. "Mom!" she called again. Trish tried the light switch, but the house remained dark. Shit, she thought. It must be the storm. Trish looked up the darkened staircase, seeing the rain pouring down through the window at the landing. Trish and Tommy climbed the staircase and looked into Mrs. Jarvis's bedroom. Trish's heart sank as she saw the empty room. "She's not here," she said, her eyes growing wide with concern. Trish moved to the open bedroom window to close it, looking out at the rain, scanning for any sign of Mrs. Jarvis. "Maybe she's going jogging," Tommy said. "She's never gone this long, and in the rain?" Trish said, brushing her wet blonde hair out of her face. "I'm going to go down the path to look for her." "Me too," Tommy said eagerly. "No, you stay here in case she comes back," Trish ordered adamantly, and moved for the door. "I want to go," Tommy protested, but Trish whipped around firmly. "Stay here and fix the lights," she snapped, and walked down the stairs into the living room. Trish felt a knot slowly forming in her gut. Surely there was nothing wrong, but still something told her otherwise. Her mother couldn't have gone into town if they had the only car, and she wouldn't be out jogging in the rain. Trish made a beeline for the flashlight that they kept hanging on the kitchen wall, grabbed a raincoat, and headed out the front door into the rain. "Mom!" she called through the whistling wind. "Mom!" She started jogging down the trail that they always went down, the one that went around the lake. "Mom!" she called again. It was useless. The storm was shrieking all around her, and it was impossible to hear much of anything. She shined the flashlight around frantically, searching for any sign of her mother. She caught the glimmer of the lake ahead through the trees and stopped. Where the hell was her mother? Trish slowed to a walk, pushing aside branches and stepping over fallen logs, the rain pelting her. As she rounded a corner of the trail, her flashlight caught a glimpse of something else, something yellow through the trees. She squinted through the rain, trying to make out what it was, but realized she had to get closer. Trish pulled aside the foliage and approached whatever it was. It was a tent, a big yellow tent in a small clearing. It must be Rob's doing, she thought. Trish curiously peeled open the flap of the tent and ducked down to see inside. What the hell? She thought as she saw the messy interior. Newspaper clippings were strewn all around the floor. There was a brightly lit lantern shining in the corner, and a broken rifle was lying in front of her. It had been snapped in two like a twig. She crawled further inside the tent and rifled through the newspaper articles. She picked one up and read it. The big bold headline read, "Crystal Lake Massacre." Just as she started to read the tiny print, Trish froze. There were footsteps outside, softly crunching over fallen leaves. Every muscle in her body tensed, and she let the newspaper fall from her hands. The footsteps grew louder and louder, and a man's hulking shadow fell over the tent. Trish's eyes widened as she saw the shadow of a machete rise into the air above her head. Jimmy and Tina were wrapped in sheets, bathing in the afterglow of sex. Tina's head was lying on Jimmy's bare chest, and his hand stroked her soft hair. Jimmy couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that he actually got laid before Ted did tonight, and by a total babe. Fuck you, Ted. Fuck you and your goddamn computer. He did it. He had had sex, and it had been good this time. That's what everyone was talking about. No wonder everyone was crazy about it. It was amazing. The feeling of being inside someone like that and your body moving in rhythm with theirs. It was electrifying. It was stupendous. It was amazing. Like nothing he had ever felt before. The climax went even beyond that. It was as if every inch of his body was being touched with some kind of elixir that brought a pleasure too intense to describe. From the nape of his neck to the tips of his toes. He had felt it course through his veins and pump through his blood. How ironic was it, he thought as he lay there beside Tina. Ted was purportedly a ladies' man and was getting laid every weekend, or so he would say in the locker room at Pinehurst High. And now he was actually the one getting laid while Ted was downstairs alone getting high. Everybody else would be pairing off with someone at the end of this wild night, and Ted would have no one. It almost made Jimmy feel guilty, but after all, he felt it was what Ted deserved for that whole dead fuck bit and being so pretentious. Maybe that was why Ted hadn't won over either of the two twins. Maybe he just tried too hard. He probably didn't get laid nearly as often as he said he did, and of course Jimmy understood why. The peer pressure of the other guys at school was strong. Guys were always wanting to know how far you had been with the girl, like it was a contest or something. It made it worse that it was a very rural school, and there wasn't exactly other options like dating someone from town or from a different district. If you hadn't banged someone from their school, it probably meant that you were a virgin. Of course, Jimmy knew there was more to life than that. It must just be a high school thing and a coming-of-age thing. People get sexually repressed themselves and bottle up those emotions and then project them onto others, like plenty of girls did at Pinehurst. The virgin shaming he had heard was even worse among the girls. Often it was the other girls in the locker room who would boast about going down on their boyfriends and then harass the girl who had nothing to say. It was a human thing. If you didn't follow certain social norms, you got ostracized for it. He had felt it himself in the boys' locker rooms. He mostly avoided all conversation about sex, but when the topic came up, he would lie and say that he had fucked some townie or something, just to get the guys off his back. He didn't know how Ted was able to keep his reputation up when in reality, he wasn't all that charismatic and can try way too hard. He guessed it was Ted's sense of humor and laid-back attitude, but even then, when Teddy was laughing, it was usually a crude joke or a joke at someone's expense. In a sense, Jimmy knew it was just his defense mechanism. He knew it was just a way of coping with his own insecurities, but it had really started to get on his nerves tonight. But now it didn't seem to matter because he had done it. He had actually gotten laid tonight, and he knew now Ted was too stoned to care, but in the morning, he relished at rubbing it in his face a little. He pictured them all down at breakfast, and he could walk in sleepily with a half-naked Tina on his arm, their after-sex complexions radiating off of them. But of course, what if Ted had been right? What if he was a dead fuck? He had to know. He felt awkward asking after they had just finished, but he just had to know. Jimmy hesitated and then spoke up. "Hey, Tina?" "Mm-hmm," she replied tiredly. Am I a dead fuck?" Jimmy stammered awkwardly. Tina laughed and then brought her head up to look at Jimmy. "You know what? I think you were incredible." Jimmy let out an elated sigh. "Really?" "Yeah," she said, laughing and kissing him passionately. "Don't you move. I'll be right back," he said. "This calls for a celebration. How about some wine?" Jimmy remembered seeing the wine bottles in the kitchen. If he could find that corkscrew that Paul used for the beer drinking contest, he could pop one open, have a glass, and see if Ted was still up to let him know just how incredible he was. He was going to make Ted eat his words if it killed him. "Sounds fine," she said with a sexy wink, as she watched him put on his boxer shorts and his shirt. She blew him a kiss as he walked to the door, picking up her panties, and stepped out into the hallway. Incredible? Was that what she said? He was incredible? Holy shit. I'm incredible. Jimmy sprawled out, shaking his head in disbelief, unable to stop smiling. He was incredible. He made his way to the stairs, a jubilancy glowing through him, swinging Tina's yellow-lace panties on his index finger and whistling a cheerful tune. He came down the stairs into the now darkened living room where Ted was puffing on a joint alone in an armchair and laughing at the film on the projector screen. Jimmy casually sauntered over to the armchair and sat down on the edge of it, plopping Tina's panties on Ted's lap. "Why don't you run those through your little computer, teddy bear?" Jimmy said proudly. Ted was too stoned to be resentful. He laughed uncontrollably, throwing the panties up in the air. "Hey, congratulations, Jimbo!" Ted said with a laugh, his eyes glowing red. "Why don't we grab a bottle of wine and celebrate?" Jimmy said, and then looked Ted dead in the eyes. "She said I was incredible." Ted laughed hysterically again. "Way to go, Jimbo!" Jimmy strolled into the dark kitchen, grabbed the bottle of wine off the wine rack, and strolled over to the sink. He began to rummage through the drawers, still whistling exuberantly. Ted's laughing and the humming from the video camera drowned out the faint sound of the back door, quietly creaking open. "Hey, Ted, where's that corkscrew? The fancy corkscrew for the wine bottle?" Jimmy called into the living room. No response, just more buzz laughter from Ted. Jimmy was oblivious to footsteps coming softly across the linoleum floor towards him. "Ted, "Where the hell is the corkscrew?" Jimmy called louder. All of a sudden, the missing corkscrew came out of the darkness at the back of the kitchen, and the blade was driven into Jimmy's hand with immense force, pinning it to the countertop. Jimmy let out a scream of excruciating pain, drowned out by Ted's cackling, and he looked up from his quivering, bleeding hand to see a huge man in a hockey mask and a grungy work suit. With his other hand, the mad killer reached into the kitchen drawer, withdrew a meat cleaver, and swung it into Jimmy's head, burying it right into the middle of his face. The cleaver sliced through Jimmy's nasal cavity and then into his skull with a sickening sound, but Jimmy felt nothing at all. "Jimmy?" she said. No answer. The room was empty as well. He probably just ran into the bathroom in the hall, she thought. Tina glanced around on the floor for the rest of her clothes, seeing her panties were missing. Jimmy probably had run off with them to mess with her or something. God, I hate lying, Tina thought as she lay there nude underneath the covers. Of course, he was really nervous and he needed encouragement. Truthfully, he had just been all right. She had slept with better guys and much, much worse. He was one of those guys that had it in him, that rough, raw masculinity that turned women on. It just needed some coaxing and some polishing. She shouldn't have gotten his hopes up, but she wasn't able to say it to his face, especially after the way his eyes lit up when she had told him he was incredible in bed. He was one of those guys that were probably pressured really hard by all the guys at school. He was likely always one of the quiet, shy guys, kinda smart and sensitive, one of the guys on the sideline standing up for the bullied kid, always bagged on about how they never get laid, called gay, called homo, just totally shit all over just because they actually knew how to treat people with respect. If you're a guy, you're either a stud who fucks every girl or you're gay, pretty much. Tina hated the way guys pressured each other. So what if a guy wants to wait? So what if they're sensitive? She thought it was sweet when a guy was the nervous type. How awkward they could be was sometimes kind of endearing. And that's how it had been with Jimmy. To be honest, she really did like him. He was cute and he actually respected her. He had been so gentle, and that was probably why he hadn't really turned her on, because, then again, it took a lot to turn her on. It took very confident and masculine men to really turn her on. She had gone for Jimmy because at least she knew he wouldn't hurt her or want to do anything crazy or get upset if she couldn't get him to orgasm. Jimmy didn't try hard. He knew how to just be his natural self and not have to put on a front. He had been terrified and hadn't really tried to hide it, and that was attractive to her. It was guys like that that still managed to turn her on enough to at least sleep with them and give them a good night once in a while, because she knew that he was one of the guys that people just loved to ignore and neglect. She had seen the longing look in his eyes when he watched Paul and Sam making out, and had been thinking about asking him to dance but not knowing how. He was so much nicer than any of her past boyfriends. She almost couldn't handle a good guy when she met one because she just wasn't used to it. It terrified her. This time he had been so natural and so real with her, and all of that went away. After all, she had been horny, and what was the problem if she let him have his night for once? She didn't feel bad about lying to him, because honesty was not always the best thing for some people. She had seen the way Ted had been prodding him and belittling him all night and acting like a jerk, and it just made her feel sorry for him. After all, she'd be leaving tomorrow and they would all go back to their worlds and forget about it. She just hoped that he didn't catch feelings for her or anything. She really wasn't feeling the group at all. Tina had seen the looks Samantha had given her when she had danced with Paul. It was one dance. What the hell was her problem? If they both loved each other, she should trust him enough to let him have one dance. No wonder they probably had a very unhealthy relationship. She had stormed out of the house off of a dance that meant nothing. Just because you dance with someone at a party doesn't mean you love them. It's a party. She didn't have to get so worked up. But then again, with a foxy guy like Paul, she didn't blame her either. Where were they? She wondered. They had probably had a fight out there in the woods and gotten lost, all because of a stupid little dance. Where was Jimmy? She glanced at the door worriedly. What was everyone doing? Tina slid out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold hardwood floor, and she moved to the window, squinting out through the oncoming rain. There was no sign of Jimmy outside, but she saw 2 bicycles sitting under the tree where she and Terry had left them. Wait, she thought. Didn't Terry leave? Why was her bike still down there? Tina frowned, confused. Maybe she had hooked up with Ted after all, Tina thought. She wouldn't have walked home in this storm. Tina turned back to the window and gasped in horror. A hockey mask was staring right back at her. It was a man standing outside on the ledge. And then 2 hands lunged forward, smashed through the bedroom window from outside, and grabbed her. Before Tina could scream, an immense force yanked her forward, and in a split second she was thrown through the broken shards of glass and was flying through the air. Tina plummeted through the air, landing hard on the top of the 73 Chevy. Her head hit the roof in an impossible way, her neck snapping in two, and her lifeless body rolled off onto the muddy ground. Trish let out a horrified scream as the machete slashed through the wall of the tent, coming 5 inches away from her. Trish crawled out on her hands and knees towards the tent entrance, but stopped when 2 legs suddenly blocked her way out. Trish looked up in a panic at the man towering above her, and she gasped when she saw who it was. It was Rob, soaking wet, caked with mud and blood, his eyes wide and frenzied, and brandishing the machete high above his head. "What the hell are you doing here?" he bellowed angrily. "What are you trying to do, kill me?" Trish shrieked, her body relaxing. Rob lowered the machete and ducked inside the tent, suddenly becoming serious with her. "Well, somebody is trying to kill me," Rob said, looking precariously out into the darkness. He then zipped up the tent behind him and gave Trish a hard stare. "What, Rob, what is all this?" she asked, bewildered, gesturing to the newspapers strewn about. "Trish, listen to me. I'm not hunting for bear out here," Rob said. "I'm hunting someone." "What?" she asked, still not understanding. "I'm looking for the man who killed my sister. His name is Jason Voorhees," Rob said. He held up a cutout photograph of his sister, a young pretty girl with blonde curly hair of about 16. His eyes began to well with tears. Trish furrowed her brow in confusion. "Jason Voorhees?" she asked. "He's the maniac who's been killing kids up at Crystal Lake," Rob said. Trish immediately remembered what her mother had told her. "Oh, but what about your sister?" Trish asked, staring at the photograph of the young girl. Rob's stare became vacant as he looked to the side, reminiscing. "My sister used to love kids. She wanted to work with them. She was up here at Crystal Lake the other night. Her name was Sandra," Rob went on, Trish listening intently. "She was one of the ones murdered when Jason went on his killing spree." He had remembered warning his little sister Sandra about some horrible murders that had taken place years before at Camp Crystal Lake, and she hadn't listened. She had been part of Paul Holt's counselor training center and had insisted on going. He thought back to the phone call that had made his blood run cold. "They found Sandra. Rob, she's dead," they had said. He had almost broken down at the thought of his kid sister gone, taken from the world so violently. He had gone up to the campgrounds that night and had identified her pale, mangled body as it lay on a steel slab at the county coroner's office. The officers had said they had found her dead, stabbed with the spear, and her boyfriend Jeff hung from a bloody bedsheets and impaled on a coat hook. Just casualties in a senseless bloodbath. Rob had tried to understand it, tried to put himself in the killer's mind, and tried to feel a sense of compassion. But the only thing he felt was a rage deep within him, and a voice that screamed at him to kill the bastard that did this to his little sister, and to seek justice for her. He had gone into town, into Crystal Lake, to ask the locals about how to get to the camp, and they hadn't been friendly. He had burst into the city hall asking for the records for Jason Voorhees and pouring through them, searching all of the resources that he could find on his childhood, his family, and anything else that he thought was important. But still it wasn't enough. Knowing about his sister's killer in his sick, twisted mind was only causing the flame to burn brighter, so bright that it threatened to consume him. Jason Voorhees had to die. He had driven the 4-hour drive back home and packed his things, and then to the hardware store to get several knives, a machete, a shotgun, some lanterns, and anything else that he might have needed for a weekend at Camp Blood. The locals weren't doing anything to stop his sister's killer, that was clear, because the killings didn't stop after the training center. There had been more slaughtered bodies of innocent teens, just like Sandra, found on the opposite side of the lake just last night. Jason was still out there. He knew it, and the local forces didn't care. "You should be out there finding this bastard," he had screamed in the sheriff's face after his sister died. He had just sat there and looked at him with a blank expression on his face. "Jason Voorhees is a legend round here," he had said, "a legend that we don't take kindly to. The camp is closed down and there is nobody out there, Mr. Dyer." "People are dying," Rob had said. "My sister is dead, and still all he got were more excuses. The cops weren't going to do a thing until half their town was dead. And not even just people from their town, but people from all over the area that come to Crystal Lake. These murders had been going on for years, ever since back in '79, when he had read about Jason's mother's killing spree. It was as if the whole town knew what was going on, but was just complacent in it happening. How many more little kids had to die? She had only been 16. "Oh God, Rob, I'm so sorry," Trish said, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Yeah, she was a good kid," he said. "And I've got to stop Jason before he kills anyone else." Trish reached out and touched him. "But isn't that man dead?" Rob shook his head. "No, Jason is alive. Look," Rob said, picking up the newspapers and flipping to the front cover. "Jason was a young boy who drowned in Crystal Lake. His mother went psycho and killed some counselors at the camp. She was killed by a survivor, but then the killing started again. And the locals said it had to be Jason, and they were right. Jason never drowned," Rob explained. "This is Jason as a child, an artist's conception by a would-be victim." Rob pointed to a sketch of a young boy in a tattered shirt and cut-off jeans. He was missing his hair, except in very sparse patches, on his abnormally shaped head. And he was dirty, very physically deformed and grotesque in appearance. The caption read, "Artist depiction of young Jason Voorhees." "But the man who killed your sister is dead. My mom heard it on the news," Trish said. "No, Trish. Jason's body disappeared from the morgue 2 days ago," Rob said, his eyes huge and foreboding. "Maybe it was stolen," Trish said. Rob scoffed. "Trish, 2 people are missing from the morgue. Coincidence? Plus, I've seen him tonight. Someone was in my tent," Rob said. "Jason is alive, and I think you and your family are in grave danger." The color drained from Trish's face as she realized the horrifying truth. "Oh, God," she muttered, and then she realized something. "Oh, God, Tommy's back at the house by himself." They both exchanged horrified glances. Rob snatched up his machete and dashed out of the tent down the trail, Trish following close behind. Sarah stared at her body in the bathroom mirror and let out a long sigh. She was in nothing but a white bra and matching panties. She was slim enough, and her breasts were of an all-right size. Certainly not the size of Sam's, but decent enough, she decided. She felt the knot twisting tighter in her stomach, and her hands began to get sweaty. Was she actually about to do this to have sex? She was scared out of her mind. Could Doug tell? Would he be able to tell, and would it not be as great because of how scared she was? Would it hurt? What if she chickened out? Would he use a condom? A million questions were racing through her mind. She continued to survey herself, hoping Doug would like what he saw. She grabbed a white, fluffy robe off the hook on the door and slipped it on, tossing her hair behind her shoulders and giving herself another look. "You got this," she consoled herself, feeling the knot screwing even tighter. God, this is terrifying. Even more terrifying than she thought it would be. Sam made it look so easy, but she had the looks to pull it off. Sam could have any guy she wanted. How she wished she was Sam sometimes, to be able to just manipulate any guy to do just about whatever she wanted, and to be able to be sexy and flirty. She just didn't have the same sexy olive complexion that Sam had, or the same hourglass figure. Her stomach stuck out a little bit, and she was lanky and awkward. Her tits weren't that big either, but she knew Doug, and he wasn't that shallow. She remembered what Sam had said about him and braced herself. She took one last look, checked to make sure she didn't have anything in her teeth, and strolled out into the hallway, seeing Doug coming up the stairs, his eyes lustful. "You look amazing," Doug said, wrapping his arms around her waist. Sarah felt her face growing hot as his arms caressed her, and she felt a tingling sensation rush from her head down to her toes. Thanks. Do you want to go to the bottom bunk?" "No, I was thinking about a nice shower," Doug said. Sarah hesitated, a small panic beginning to flutter in her heart. Sarah blocked out that thought. "Just go with it," she told herself. "Sure," she said seductively. They lip-locked in a passionate kiss, filled with the lust that they both didn't see coming, and backed away into the bathroom, closing the door behind them. Ted was officially starting to feel the after effects of the weed hit him, and they hit him like a truck. The THC had settled into the rest of his body, and he was thoroughly zonked, glued to the armchair and staring with a glazed-over look in his eye at the projector screen. He couldn't actually believe Jimmy got laid before he did. "You blew it, Teddy Bear," he thought to himself. "You really fucking blew it." Both of the twins hated his guts, and there were no other girls left to fuck around with. Paul was probably getting action from Sam out at the lake. Doug and Sarah were upstairs getting it on, and Jimmy actually wasn't a dead fuck. He felt the bitter tinge of resentment towards himself. Why did he have to insult people, and why a guy like Jimmy? Just a nice, confused kid looking for love. And he was his friend, one of Ted's only friends, and he treated him like shit. Jimmy had never done anything wrong to him, and still Ted found ways to pick on his lanky gait and general awkwardness. The truth was that it was how Ted dealt with all of his insecurities. But his baked mind couldn't think about that right now. All he could do was half smile and stare dazedly at the screen. Maybe it was because deep down Ted hated himself sometimes, and everyone else saw it in his overly outgoing and macho persona. The girls at Crystal Lake High gave him the nickname Teddy Bear, and not as an affectionate pet name, but as a way to let other girls know he was coming and to get the hell out of Dodge. He was the same way at school. None of the girls actually liked him or fucked him. He just said that he got a lot of pussy to look good. Maybe he was just too forward. What the hell was he doing wrong? He was good looking, had great hair, smooth talking. He was doing everything right. He was doing every single thing right, everything that he read in all of the best dating books out there. Charm them, romance them, tell them how beautiful they are, and nothing worked. Still, he was rejected constantly. Jimmy could at least get a girl, and how? Jimmy was too much of a nice guy. Girls like total sleazes, they just do. It's that whole reverse psychology thing, where women like being treated like shit. It was sort of like a domination thing. If a woman feels insulted by a man, it turns her on and makes her want to please him even more. Ted read all about it in some news article about this guy who got all these chicks simply by telling them straight to their face how worthless they were. Ted didn't take it that far, but he still followed all the other advice he had been given and didn't have any success with any of it. Maybe he didn't need to try so hard. Maybe he could just give up on women. There were so many that were just so emotional, so needy, and such bitches sometimes. Just look at what happened to Sam and Paul tonight, wherever the hell they are. Good thing he didn't have to deal with any of that. No angry, jealous girlfriends, no birthday and anniversary presents. Ted laughed as the girl on screen danced to a cheesy 30s bebop tune, her breast bouncing. He got to his feet and staggered clumsily up to the projector screen and pretended to talk to the girl on screen. "Hey, don't you want to give Teddy Bear a kiss?" Mwah, mwah, he said, followed by another boisterous explosion of stone laughter. All of a sudden, the projector screen went blank, and the camera stopped rolling. The music from the movie slowly died out and was replaced by a broken-up whirring sound. Ted frowned, and he turned to face the projector, shielding his eyes from the bright white light. It happened in a flash. A butcher knife from the kitchen came ripping through the projector screen and plunged into the base of Ted's skull. Blood splattered all across the blank screen as Ted was yanked back through the rip in the screen and into the air like a fish on a hook. Jason yanked the knife out of his head with a sickening squish and let his body crumple to the floor in a heap. He looked towards the stairs and started up, breathing laboriously, feeling the rage build again as he heard the running water and sounds of lovemaking. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Chapter 7 of Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, a fan novelization by Landon Turner. Gotta say, once again, Landon is knocking it out of the park with this. Dude, you should really write a novelization for 5, 6, 7, 8, or they've already got one for 6, I'm sorry. For 5, 7, 8, Jason Goes to Hell. I would definitely narrate them here on the channel, and I think everybody would greatly enjoy those. Excuse me. I really enjoyed this chapter. I love how you're diving into everybody's heads more, getting more of their backstory, humanizing them a little more. It makes their death scenes a little more impactful, and I can't wait to see how you handle certain scenes coming up in the final couple chapters, especially Rob. I'm looking forward to seeing what you did with Rob and Jason. He's killing me! But yeah, I'm reading this for the first time as I'm narrating it, and I'm enjoying it just like all the listeners are. You're doing a great job. Everybody be sure to thank Landon, and I'll be back very soon with more of this great fan novelization. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and I'll see you soon.